Oh, we don't get a warning anymore. It just starts. Okay. All right, here we go.
Yeah, but didn't we bitch about that warning for an awfully long time?
Well, you get the warning when you're stopping. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Yeah. I kind of don't know what to say today. Sometimes I know what to say, but I'm all discomfited. But
is that because you're like a half hour away from finishing a book?
If I can make myself do it. I was disappointed that I couldn't finish it in my writing time this morning. That's always just like, oh, come on. You know, there's maybe an hour. I don't think it's a half hour, maybe an hour.
Yeah, I'm starting to really hate my gym time, which is it's noon, and
So you have no flexibility. You're like, I want to go an extra 15 minutes. No.
Yes, and it's like been the last few days where I'll get to the very end. So yesterday was the perfect example. I had one beat at the end of a chapter, and I just really, really wanted to be done because coming back and finishing off a chapter later sucks.
Oh, that's like me after my exit triggers today.
Yes, it's just the worst. It's hard to get your head into it. It's hard to care as much. You feel like the seam is going to be really obvious later. And that happened. I was like, I was in flow. My alarm went off and like actually startled me out of it. And I'm like, oh shit, now I have to go. This isn't cool. And it was when I came back. I mean, I probably had 10 minutes worth of writing, but it ended up taking half an hour and pissing me off. And it's just like, I really, but if I don't go to the gym, then I pay. I pay for missing my appointment.
Right.
And so anyway.
They really have that down, that tweaking, like, well, you think you're going to skip, motherfucker? I guess you aren't.
Well, it's smart because I know myself, and there's so many times, like, I mean, yesterday's a perfect example. I would have rather finished my chapter than get the workout in, but I wasn't going to pay to finish the chapter knowing I could do it later. So whatever.
Yeah. I'm a little more motivated to finish it today than I normally would, just because this is the first project in a really long time. At least it feels that way to me, where I've just written it. And it was supposed to be like a real short one. I should have been done a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, this is a novella. It's a 100,000 word novella, right?
Right. I thought it was going to be like around 50, maybe 60,000 words. And it'll be about 85, I think, when it's all said and done. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have that right now. I have the thing I'm writing was outlined as a novella, and I passed the novella mark yesterday. And I also passed the midway point yesterday.
What's a novella mark?
Like under 40,000
I was going to say 35.
Okay. But I was actually at 35 yesterday. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but Johnny and I found that, and I think that'll actually tie in today's topic a little bit, which I know you'll announce in just a second. But Johnny and I both realized recently that, or not even realized this, I think
leaned into it. That's what I was going to say. It's not because we knew it.
Yeah,
but we're like going ahead and embracing it, and it's just the fact that we're going to run long. Like chapters are going to be long, books are going to be long, and I used to kind of fight it, and then feel successful. Like, okay, I wrangled that book in 80,000 words. But that doesn't even make sense. Like my natural style is longer. And so being able to lean into it is better if we can do it.
Yeah. And I'm finding that my natural style is a lot longer also. I'm also finding that I have a natural style, which, Bonnie flew into town and we spent the last week together. And
that's kind of your something cool.
It actually is my something cool. I'll blend that all together actually, because it was my something cool. I got to see a lot of stuff with Bonnie. We did a lot of brainstorming, a lot of just general world domination talk, the different pen names we're building.
World domination? Are you taking over?
Yes. But we also watched Kill Bill, and we saw The Joker with Johnny, and the Parasite, which was...
No, we didn't see Parasite. Oh, maybe you guys saw Parasite.
Yeah, Bonnie and I saw Parasite.
I want to see that.
Yeah, I've seen it twice now.
I like it.
Family. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Is there a supernatural element to it or no?
No, but there doesn't.
Oh, never mind. I don't want it.
No.
Oh, Dave, I started watching The Punisher.
Oh, finally?
You're like, yeah, I mean, finally. But
after it's canceled.
Well, but the fact that I started, like, how about that? Because
no credit for you.
Well, there's so many things. You're the
reason it was canceled.
I'll get into it next time. I was just telling Robin about this, that we actually started watching The Americans together last night. And also, like, I know it's already done and everything, but And then there's like just a few scenes that are just a little like, she just a little bit squeamish, just a little bit like, ooh. And I said, we have to watch this. We have to, because my list of things that I want to watch, like I always want to watch stuff that's tense and a little violent. And so that list is so long. I can only watch so much on my own.
I saw the first 2 seasons of Americans, but then I didn't go further.
You didn't finish? Oh my God.
No, I know people love that show. I just wasn't quite as compelled. There was other stuff I'd rather watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you want to flow into your
family drama?
Yeah. So Parasite actually was my something cool specifically, and the reason for that is that it's a tragedy. But
so it should be Dave's something cool.
Well, Bonnie and I were actually just talking in Slack a few minutes before the show started about tragedies. And
is it a masturbate tragedy? A tragedy that you would masturbate to?
Masturbate tragedy. I kind of like that. It works together.
Oh, see, I was giving him the silent treatment.
I like this silent.
I'm gonna roll. I'm becoming more and more Dave. Like even within the company, I'm becoming a little bit more Dave. I'm gonna morph into him. It's gonna be like remember when morphing was new, like with that Michael Jackson black or white video,
yeah.
Right?
So yeah, it's really good. But one of the things I really love about it, I would compare it to Hitchcock for sure. But even having said that, it has a foreign feel, but in a good way. Yes, you have to read subtitles. It's South Korean.
I don't know no subtitles.
But I do know that it just has a different rhythm than Western films for the most part. And so I didn't know what was going to happen. And it's nice to see a movie where you can't kind of guess the next 20 minutes or so at any given time. And it's up for all the awards. It deserves a lot of them. Like it's really, really good. But anyway, Bonnie and I talked a lot about the voice and style and things like that. And, I was showing her we watched a lot of different pilots together. And so in talking about my style, I really have learned that for a long, long time, I just kind of disappeared. Like when I write with Dave, it's a little more like mimicking Dave or Stephen King, or there's a certain vibe. Copy is definitely shorter, more terse. But left to my own devices, I write long, I write wordy, I write, a little more like Johnny than Dave probably. And so leaning into that allows me to write more faster because I'm not in my head about this. Does this need to be tight? Does this need to be sharp? But I'm just kind of looser, and which is how I think you probably write, Johnny, real loose.
Yeah, I don't know that I would describe it as loose, but I'm letting myself be a little bit more indulgent with the language. I think that I talked about this before, and maybe eventually it deserves kind of an episode. But I think that as I was learning more and more about sort of the things about writing that I took for granted, I didn't really think about structure and the waypoints along, that you run into as you're writing and all that stuff. And I just did it intuitively. And so as part of the correction back from that, as I'm just sort of really stepping into like, okay, I remember this now. I remember this muscle is just letting myself be a little bit more indulgent. Like, okay, I'm not going to worry about every single, because, you get that like, okay, every scene has to have a meaning. Every little thing has to have a meaning. And a lot of that's true. But if I overcorrect in that direction, it screws me up. So giving myself permission to just be like, no, I'm just going to go with the flow. And actually, this is a little mini something cool, but I've been rereading a project that Sean and I haven't touched in a while because we're gonna do the sequels. And so I don't remember this very well. And I'm like, did I write that? I don't even remember. There's some really weird, like esoteric shit in there. I'm like, this sounds really good. It probably doesn't mean anything. Sounds really good. And I don't know where I came up with it or if you added it or what, which is neat.
Now I'm very curious. Tell me what it is later.
Well, I'll just tell you now. I don't need to be coy. It's The Inevitable. So it's the second book.
Oh, no, I knew what you were reading, but I didn't know what.
Yeah, it's the second one. It's when this isn't a spoiler for anybody, but when Flavius is at the Great Abandon, which is like robot fights, he's describing some of the fights like through his point of view, and there's some just this robot has this adaptation or this add-on or something like that, and I'm just like, boy, did I study robotics or am I just really good at bullshit? Which
well, we did a decent amount of study. I think we probably did more
that's not where I
research
get any of that. When I'm in flow, I am not going and doing study. It's just shit that
true.
comes out, or I'll look up some little thing or something like that.
Dave, do you have something cool?
My something cool was last Sunday, the big event.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say just last Sunday was your something cool. Yeah, there was this day. I didn't have to do anything. It was great.
The big event that, like, everybody was excited about. The
Was
Super Bowl.
Your
The
Savior
Super Bowl.
resurrected?
Was it
Yes.
really the Super Bowl? Because I thought you were fucking with us. And you were going to be like, you were going to try to bait us to say Super Bowl. And you were like, no, it's this other thing.
I thought so too. I totally thought that's what he
No,
was
I was
doing.
actually going a completely different direction, I think, went over everybody's head. But yeah. So yeah, I usually when it comes around time to the Super Bowl, it's either a team wins I don't want to win, or it's two teams I don't even give a fuck about. And this time it was the Chiefs, and I enjoyed their comeback victory. Watched it with my sons. So yeah.
I never give a shit about the Super Bowl, but I've really fallen in love with the ritual of it. So I hauled ass out of the story shop thing, like early story shop summit.
Well, that's where I was going.
Okay.
I was expecting when you say story shop, I'd be like, no, who the fuck would go to story shop on Super Bowl Sunday? What the fuck?
Well, I did both. I did
Wow.
both. I hauled out. They had a Super Bowl party. I don't know.
I don't want
how
to
it
watch
went,
a
but I do
Super
know
Bowl
they
with
had
other
one.
people. Who the fuck does that?
Dave, next year, note, not interested in story shop Super Bowl party. Note, done.
Ethan went to a friend's for Super Bowl. It is his religion. And so Bonnie came over when we watched Kill Bill 1 and 2 back to back. We did that instead.
Well, the best news to come out of the Super Bowl, though, is that this Christian podcaster wants to sue the Super Bowl, Pepsi, and everybody for the halftime show because they showed crotch shots, and he doesn't want the invitation to hell that inspired. So I guess he's looking for money, and I love it. That's just a funny
But you
story.
criticize everything, Dave. That sounds really legit to me. I mean, some of the things that you say, but that, I mean, I don't want to see a crotch and end up in hell. That sucks.
Yes, if you see a vagina, you will go to hell.
I think we just need to desensitize. Just everybody be naked all the time. And then these issues won't come up.
No, not everybody. Come on. You don't want to see me naked walking around.
Oh, maybe I do.
I do.
Your dad does. I mean, your
That's
dad said
right.
I was beautiful.
I do have a legit something cool, and it's
Joel said I do.
I was listening to when I was running a couple of weeks ago, I decided just nostalgically from the police to listen to.
It was actually Sting, and the entire band was behind Johnny. They were just running for blocks.
When I ran the Columbus Marathon like 10 years ago or something, I listened to the original call that Sean and I did where I was interviewing Sean about like publishing on Kindle. Those were the words that we used. And so I was like, I'm going to listen to that again while I'm running, because that'll be kind of fun. And what was really, really interesting about it was that there's nothing in it that made me wince, right? So there were things that have updated, but it's not like you or me even made any predictions that were stupid and that didn't come true, or that hailed something as amazing that then immediately fell on its face. There were some things like we were talking about free and 99 cents, which worked differently, but that was just like what we're doing now. And everything else was very evergreen. And I thought that was really interesting because that call was nearly 10 years ago now, maybe 8 or 9. And to see that it's like everything changes, but everything stays the same. And
yeah,
that
would have been fall of 2011. So yeah, 9 years ago, or almost 9 years ago, which is nutty. Like, it is nutty. But I think that was the magic in that call. I think you and I both understood that what we were talking about was evergreen. It's very simple. The write, publish, repeat model is not complicated. It is evergreen. It's when it gets taken to an illogical extreme, which is write, publish, repeat on a monthly basis.
or a bi-weekly basis, or
regardless of quality or sustainability, that's illogical, and it allows your storytelling to break. But write good stories, connect with an audience, do it over and over again, and get a little bit more success with each release. Yeah, that worked 10 years ago. It'll work 10 years from now.
You might be amused to listen back to that too. So.
Yes. Do you have a link to it?
I have the file. So I don't know if we have it hosted anywhere or how.
Just drop it in Dropbox somewhere and send me a link to that.
It's on an 8-track tape.
Okay.
I know. Awesome. I listened to it like maybe 5 or 6 years ago because you sent me the file.
Yeah, I'll stick it in Dropbox and maybe if Jen gets ambitious and wants to post it or something, no pressure. Like, I don't really care. But if she does, then maybe it'll be in the show notes. But yeah, I'll drag that over for you. So, well, let's get to today's topic, which is when life gets in the way. And I think this is something that all of us are like have stuff to say about in various ways at various different times. But this is basically like, you're trying to do your creative work, and even if you block out the time for it, even if it doesn't interfere with like your actual schedule in a material way, it still tends to kind of fuck with your mojo, right? Like, because your mind is elsewhere, you can't unplug. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, I think all of us have faced this, but and we've all gotten through it. And like, okay, so Dave is the example that we usually bust on the most. Like, oh, life fucks with him. He puts babies, he kills babies when he's sad.
Okay, just first time listeners, just so you know, like, that's the kind of guy you're dealing with.
In a blender.
Kills babies when he's bored.
I need inspiration. Feed me.
It's not
muses.
when he's bored. It's when he doesn't know, like, when. So
it's his one trick pony. What do I do? I don't know. They're at the store. What do I do? Oh, dead baby, obviously.
Joel said also when he's happy.
Yeah.
Dead babies in the deli department.
It's for those of you who don't know this story. We don't need to go the long version, but basically,
is it a masturbate tragedy?
It was a masturbate tragedy. Dave's low was when he put a dead baby on Christmas in a story that he was hating.
And it was like a cat shitting on your bed when he's mad at you.
At least I could have went lower. I could have put it in the actual present. That could have been the present.
Just like in 7. A spoiler for 7. Uh-oh.
It was written kind of like that. They, it's Christmas morning. They creep down. There's the tree. There's the crib. There's the baby. And so it was just dark and unnecessary.
Why is the baby downstairs if the family's upstairs?
I don't remember.
I don't think it.
Maybe I made that part.
Maybe the baby was dead the night before.
It was in a stocking.
Maybe that's the reveal.
Actually, what happened was the family forgot to leave cookies for Santa. So Santa said, "Fuck that!" Went upstairs, took the baby out of the crib, ate it, pulled its intestines out, and just slurped them up like spaghetti.
Now it is fun. Okay, so I'm going to reiterate how fun it's going to be if this is somebody's first episode.
And this is why you fucking leave cookies for Santa.
And bears.
And bears.
All right, so I don't know what the original thought on that was, but life getting in the way? Is that sort of where we're going with that?
So that was a way at the time. Dave didn't really have a set of coping skills. And that was
he had them.
Now.
They were just not socially acceptable.
That was the coping skills he used. Right now, his ass is getting kicked on a book again, but he's not. Hey. Now, I haven't seen it, so maybe there's a dead baby parade. I don't know.
Dead babies on every page.
But I don't get that impression from talking to Dave. I get the impression that he's finding the story. He's working his way through the story. He's not falling off. He's still writing every day. And so, same with Johnny. Johnny had a very difficult creative year last year, and I had my shit too. And so all of us have gotten through that stuff, and it's very difficult, or it can be difficult, when your emotional self is rocked or your confidence gets rocked to create, great work. So that's the question today. Like, how do we all do that? How do we focus on what we want to say when there's shit in the back of our head?
Okay, so that's the introduction. So I'm not entirely sure how to begin tackling this. You just want to talk about like some of the things that do get in the way, some of the things that might be.
Well, okay, we know the things that get in the way. There's moving, right? Marriage, kids, divorce, job changes, getting sick. This is all the stuff that
construction, or having people, like if you've ever had service people in your house, somebody fixing the toilet or something, like that's fun.
Any disruption to your schedule. So for me, it's really important to have consistency. Right now, what I found is working best for me is 3 90-minute blocks of just writing distractions out. But like last weekend, we had the summit, and then we had Bonnie here. So I was with her, from late morning through the day, and so I couldn't get any flow. But because, and this is this is the strategy here that works for me, is having the right thing to write. So because I'm really in touch with what I'm writing, once Bonnie was gone, I was able to get right back into the story. So that's a large part of it. I think that, well, okay, so maybe we don't want to get into strategies yet. Maybe we want to stay with, the things that can happen and how each of them are a little bit different.
Yes, but Robin just started, I don't know, grinding nails. So I'm going to mute.
Stonecutter.
All right, Dave. So out of all of these, you've actually had the most static life. So Johnny and I have both moved, me several times since you've known me. Well, we haven't gotten remarried or had new kids. But we've had a lot of shift within the company. So I think job changes are a big deal there, right?
Or uncertainty about your place, which is a variant on job changes. So
well,
if there were,
that's what I mean. Yeah, because we've had the same job, all three of us, in one way or another for the 7 years we've known each other.
Oh my God.
But it's different, right? Because the company has changed. We went from being pure authors to whatever we did during the Smarter Artist years to what we're doing now. And now there's a studio and a community. And so it's all variants, but it's never been exactly the same job. Dave's had closer to the same job than either of us. But even within that, there were a lot of things that we've asked him to do. Actually, that's a good example. As much as we all loved having Dave in Austin for these events, and people loved seeing Dave in Austin during these events, they were always turmoil for Dave. He never wanted to go, and they always fucked with his creativity and his production.
But it never spilled over to us. Like, there were never any things where we noticed that he was upset in any way.
I'm like a closed book.
So Dave, I actually do think that we should start with you, and this isn't like a worst show ever thing at all.
But it should be.
But you do have to adapt the most. You do have to cope the most. You do have the most head shit. So, and you're so much better at dealing with it now than you used to be. So when life gets in the way, how do you get ahead of it or stay in front of it?
Fuck, I don't know. I just, well, Xanax. It depends. Okay, I would say, I'd say it's better now because, like, I look for consistency in my life when everything else is kind of off the track. So, like, when I started walking and losing weight and stuff, like that helped to have that. When I didn't have that before, like, everything was just off the rails.
So you look for something that when you can't control a lot of things, you look for the thing you can control?
Yeah, I look for the things I can control. And Joel said friends help, emotional support. Yeah, and kind of knowing that, you guys are there and I can talk to you even if I don't always do it. Because it's hard to talk when you're on the cross.
Zing.
Yeah. So I mean, knowing you guys are there and, we can talk and stuff, that helps. But I think lately, like with this story right now, the schedule and the holidays and all that kind of fucked with it. Plus, I didn't like where the story was going. So it was two things at once. And that's difficult. Like, if I don't have anything, like if my schedule's kind of fucked up and I got some shit going on and I'm anxious and all that, and I don't like the story, it's hard. But once I find a way to, like, get into the story, get lost in the story or whatever, and I just focus on the thing that I do have control over, it kind of helps ride out the turmoil of the other things. I feel like I'm being vague here.
No, I get that. And I have the same experience because I was actually I think I told this story separately to Johnny and to Bonnie this last weekend. But I gained a bunch of weight in December.
You
and
fat bastard.
and it was intentional because
he was researching a role.
it's not like Fat Mac after, you know, season 7 of Philadelphia, where he just all of a sudden shows up heavy. It wasn't like that at all, but there were some definite stressors. And, you know, with the last bit of the year, like I just kind of had a choice. Like, what do I want to do here? I just didn't have my mental shit together. And, you know, the year was coming to a close, and I just had a lot on my plate, and there was a lot I was trying to do.
A lot on your plate, literally.
Literally, yes. And that was something that helped. And, you know, if you've been listening to this show for at least 1 year, then you probably have heard about my February shit that I do every year, where I don't eat any sugar. And I've been doing that. This is my 22nd year not doing that. So, you know, it is very habitual for me. And
You've been doing it since you were 8?
Yes. yes, I have. So I've been doing this for a long time. I know it works. I know I'm always going to drop, you know, 15 pounds or whatever in February. So if I need to, which, you know, last year I wasn't an asshole in December, so I didn't need to, but now I do. And it was okay, because allowing myself to fall short there helped me stay consistent with a lot of other things. So I think that when you're trying to get through something, it's important to be realistic. I think the worst thing you can do is say, there's nothing wrong with me, I feel fine, because that stuff does bleed out. It just does. So knowing, you know, what the problem is, and maybe you can't fix it, maybe you have to defer it and say, you know what, I'm gonna take care of that later, but in the meantime, take care of yourself as very best you can.
You know, that's an interesting strategy, because, you know, I didn't run into that specifically with my rough year last year, but I have in the past. So I think a lot of people who are regulars know my fruit fly story, where I went to grad school and it sucked, and I was like having panic attacks before I started writing. And I know during that phase that was really tough. Like, that was just emotionally difficult. And my dad actually suggested this. So it's advice you got to use with caution, I think. But it was actually very similar. He was like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta like eat some cheeseburgers or something. And I did exactly it's funny. It's very similar to what you did. And I was just like, yeah, you know, normally I'm very strict with my diet, but fuck it. Because if I gave on that one way, then it gave me strength over here, because you only have so much willpower.
Right. Exactly.
But it is tough, because if your vice is cocaine, then, you know, watch out.
Well, right. And Marie said emotional eating is probably not the world's healthiest coping mechanism.
Agreed. But agreed. I think you can know who you are. So Sean knows that when he needs the discipline, when he has February, he can turn it on. And I feel I know the same thing about myself too, but it varies. Your mileage may vary, basically.
Right. Like, I don't have an eating problem typically. Like, I love food, whatever, but like, I'm really healthy.
I'm good at eating.
99% of the time, you know, like, I make healthy choices when I go to restaurants. You know, my wife cooks very healthy, so it's just not an issue. But it was December, there's more shit in the house, and like, it was a way to.
Are you glad that we didn't give you caramels this year?
Yes.
we thought about it. My gift to you is not giving you caramels or zucchini bread, because I was like, well, they don't want it.
Yeah, that's always great. So no, Marie's absolutely right. You don't want to just emotionally eat. There's a lot of things you just don't want to do. Like, you know, I didn't go out and get a bunch of hookers and like start shooting heroin.
Oh, well, I did.
Like, but I knew that, look, there's a certain amount of responsibilities that I have to do. And to your point, Johnny, you only have so much willpower. So if I know I'm spending it just to stay at a baseline, that's a good way to kind of juggle a little bit. But I think that the better coping mechanism, and something that like I'm really already early in this year really leaning into and learning, is just having the right project in front of you at the right time. That does make a huge difference. So, you know,
what's the right project? What are the parameters for that?
Okay, so I'm going to use somebody else as an example for this. Actually, there's somebody in our studio who had
his name is David.
Daniel, right?
This actually isn't Dave, but this is somebody who's had a really a difficult year, just a hard year, and I think this person struggles with confidence anyway. And confidence is hard. Confidence, if you struggle with confidence, it shows up in your writing, it shows up in your momentum. It shows up in a lot of those places. And,
Your
we
erections.
suffer. Absolutely. We suffer from, the bullshit. Like there's so much trauma that we get that we don't even realize we have because other people told us something or, said something and it's embedded. And here's an example with this specific author. So they wrote something and I was editing it. And I want to say this is maybe 6 months ago or so. And there was this beautiful, beautiful phrase, like just a passage. I don't know if it was 2 sentences, a paragraph, whatever. But
Naked Dave.
It really did stand out. And so I tagged it. And, in the comment, I said something like, every one of your books I've seen so far, has a few passages like this that really stand out. I wanted to compliment this. I wanted to recommend or commend this and say I loved reading this. And the comment that I got back was, I always allow myself, a few of those per book. And that really struck me. I was like, you allow yourself? Why would you allow yourself? Like, this is beautiful writing. Why isn't this
the rest has to suck?
Why are you, pulling yourself back? And that's what they said, that they had writing mentors and coaches who told them not to do that it was getting in the way of reading. And like, I understand the message there that your prose can be too purple and it can really get in the way, but this wasn't that. This was just exceptional writing. And to be holding back exceptional writing because somebody told you that not to write what you feel, like I can't even imagine if Johnny was giving me drafts that I could feel him holding himself back. Like Johnny puts himself onto the page. I can tell when Dave's holding himself back too. There's a certain rhythm to his to his story.
But with Dave, it's not always a bad thing that he holds himself back.
But it's a lack of confidence. Dave's lack of confidence when it's there really shows up on the page.
How does it manifest? Like, do you have any examples?
I could.
Like, do I write more vaguely?
You write a lot more vague. You're removed from the copy, so instead of the character feeling something, you'll use the word "you" a lot. Your writing becomes a little bit apologetic. You're once removed from it. It's like you're hedging your bets narratively, and that's not what was happening with this other author at all. It was just like I question, like you are holding back. I can feel that. And so that combined with the difficult year that this author has, I just know there's natural confidence issues and then life kicking you in the face issues, which, exacerbate that problem.
Dead baby on Christmas.
Now there hasn't been any dead babies in Christmas showing up.
It's hard to write when there's a dead baby on Christmas.
But I think that for this author, the right answer, and we got on this rather immediately, is to write the right story. And the right story in this case, we couldn't jump right to it because there's a couple of sci-fi books that were on the plate, and then thrillers are their very natural sweetest spot, I guess. But as soon as we can, we're going to write something that is from this author's heart, that helps to deal with some of the trauma and some of the things that they were going through, and to get that on the page, because that immediately allows you to deal with your shit and kind of put your art there. It's this whole thing that we talk internally about, the art of catharsis, that sometimes putting your pain onto the page is the best way to deal with it and grow as an artist. Last year, I went through some shit with my family. My dad and I actually haven't talked since July, and that could have been a painful thing, and it really wasn't. Instead, I was able to take that, and according to Bonnie, who's the only person who's read any of this copy, she thinks that the book that I wrote to deal with that is the best thing I've written so far. To me, it feels a little boring. I'm not sure that that's true, but I also have no perspective whatsoever. I trust Bonnie. Bottom line is, it's almost 200,000 words, and I wrote it in 30 days. So it's definitely the fastest thing I've ever written. And it got me over something where I could have been buried by inertia. I could have just been like feeling really bad because I had to deal with this thing. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was in my head. Family issues, like, they go deep, right? Our families inform us, they make us who we are. And when they're in our heads, they're really, really in our heads.
You're
And
supposed to bury that shit like a man.
if I had buried that shit like a man, I would have had a really disastrous year. Instead, I confronted it as soon as I possibly could and made it my next artistic project, which is, one of the things I suggested for this author, because I do think that our head shit can get into our creative shit, and there's a wall in front of us. And if we can't get over it or under it or around it, we're stopped. And so I think battling it with our actual projects is a good idea sometimes. And maybe the thing that we're scared most to create or to talk about is the thing that we should actually lean into.
So here's a question. So I'm listening to the David Sedaris masterclass right now, and he's kind
better
of
than the Master of a Tragedy.
The Master of a Tragedy. Well, that's the next episode, is writing the Master of a Tragedy.
That'll be my masterclass.
Wow,
be
the
me
Master
naked
of a
on a
Tragedy.
stool.
Yeah, wow. Anyway, so one of the
I
things
want to see Dave naked on a stool.
he says he's really sorry for people who aren't writers, because every bad thing that happens. So he tells the story about when he was in France and he didn't speak French, and he went to a doctor, and the doctor told him that the nurse told him, strip down to your underwear, and then blah, 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 some stuff he didn't understand. So he understood just enough about strip down to your underwear. And so long story short, he ended up going into the waiting room because he thought that made sense. And then people kept coming in. It was like empty when he went in, and he's sitting there in his underwear. People keep coming in, and then he's too embarrassed to leave because he's like, well, then they're going to know that I did something wrong. And so anyway, the whole point is he's going, I'm sitting there, I'm like embarrassed out of my skin. And I just keep thinking, someday I can write about this. And he's like, I don't know what people do. Like, even people who are like facing like grave illnesses or terrible things, he's like, it won't be funny eventually, but it will be something that you can use. And he goes, I don't know what people who aren't writers do with that energy. So on that scale, it's fodder, right? It's like creative catharsis, like we're talking about. But the whole point of this show is when it gets in the way and stops you. So where's the line, right? Where's the line where you can use it as catharsis?
Yeah. Okay. So, and Joel has a good question too, where he says, sometimes you get low, you hate yourself, and everything you do sucks, but you still have to do it. What then? Right. So what about when, you can write as therapy later, but if it's just miserable to get through and you don't have the energy to write, what do you do? And that happens too. So starting out this year, I had taken a break and I wasn't writing the right thing. I was writing the wrong thing. I chose it because I thought it would be easy, but I didn't really take the time. I mean, that's all my fault. I didn't take the time with this outline to really adapt it to myself and get to know it. I just kind of started writing, and I figured this will be easy. This will be no problem, and it was a big problem. But the way I got through it was by not being too precious with it. So the old me would have, who wasn't as good at navigating this kind of stuff, which is why I would have really inconsistent production. I could get, I'd have a month where I got, 150,000 words, no problem, and then didn't produce anything for 2 or 3 months. Like, that was very much my, my routine for a long, long time. Now I'm pretty consistent. I can get a few thousand words every single day, no matter what. But the words were really painful in early January. And the old me would have gone back to the beginning and started fixing the problems with the story, or just making a lot of notes as I went through it, really fixing those decisions. But I think that if I had done that, I would still be on that book, and it wouldn't be much better than it is now in the semi-done pile. And worse, I wouldn't feel good about what I was writing, and that would really affect how well I could write going forward. So like the project that Johnny wants to finish up today, that hopefully he can, because I'll feel bad for you if you have to carry that over, because I know how that feels. But that's a powerful project for us as creative partners, because it's the first time in a long time where he's got his mojo back. And I'm really excited to read that story and then use it to build what's next. Like, okay, now, these are the things that Johnny's doing really well and how he's feeling. So here's what the next outline sounds like. And that's positive momentum. The project before that just beat the shit out of him. And it made any project feel like,
I get to go back to that next, which I'm really looking forward to.
What did you do with the project? You said you usually would go back to the start. What did you do?
Okay, so what I did is I really just went through it, and I knew I wasn't super happy with it, and I was okay with that. There was a lot of just like surrendering, where I had planned to get 3 chapters a day done on it, and I got one. That's what I averaged, but I hit it every day. I didn't allow myself to not commit, not to show up. So I got at least a chapter in a day, and I just kept telling myself that 100% of the time so far, a second draft has been better than a first draft. So the only failure I could possibly have is not delivering the words, because it's not done until it's done. And so the real thing was getting through the draft. So I haven't looked at it. I'm on to something else. I'll go back to it in a week, 2, maybe as much as a month. And I'm positive that my brain will have been percolating during that time, and it will be a much, much better story than it would have if I'd gone back and tinkered with it, from the beginning, because I wasn't really in the space. But the worst thing I could have done is just give up and go on to something else, because I would have just repeated the cycle with another project. It was my headspace that was the problem.
Now, I do have a suggestion here for what kind of worked for me this time around, because I face this problem a lot. Like when you don't like the story or it's just tough, you're probably missing something or writing the wrong story. And what I found helped me this time and in the past, and I always forget the lesson, is to go, like if you're writing a series, it's easier, but even if you're writing something completely different. For me though, it was, what is missing from this book that I liked in my other books in this series?
That's great, Dave.
Because I wasn't feeling that connection. And when I read through the older books, I felt the connection. So find the thing that's missing, whether it's an element to the story, whether it's a message, a theme, or just a feeling. There's something probably missing if you're not feeling it. And what is it that's missing that you need to bring to this story? And one other thing I like to do, and I did this a lot when I was younger, when I struggled actually finishing a story. I would have like little fake interviews. Like I would write out interviews like I was being interviewed by a reporter for Entertainment Weekly or whatever, as if the book were already done. Like, and what is that person asking me about the book? What do they want to talk about the book? And it's a little mental exercise, but it kind of makes it feel like a real thing in your head and like an important thing, a good thing. And it helps to identify the things that people might identify with or like about your story and make it more real to you so you can actually make it real.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Mm-hmm. Joel says it's the being okay with it part that's fucking tough. And he's right. But what you're suggesting is finding a way to get excited and or inspired about the story again.
Which... Yeah, what are you not okay with? That's like, it's probably not a skill thing. I think it's a story thing. It's probably almost always going to be a story thing. I mean, it could be a skill thing early on, and that's just something you got to work through. But if it's a story thing,
you can know story and you can be okay otherwise, but it can just be like you just can't get at it too. Like I've had that. I can't focus.
Well, it's like, okay, so the suggestion I was giving the other author earlier is how do you make the next story you tell super meaningful to you so that you can feel, oh my God, I'm a great author because the words are pouring out of me. And Dave is like, how can I make this meaningful to me? I think anytime you can make it meaningful to you. Here, I'll get a little more specific with my last project because I think that will help understand what was the problem with it. So Joel actually wrote this outline for me, and Joel's super, super good at writing action. He might be the best in the company at writing action. And so this outline had a lot of action, and it had a lot of like geography to it where, okay, this scene would start and then the next scene would start and pick up where that scene left off. So it was all action beats. But I'm a pretty emotional character-based writer. And so I care a lot more about what's happening to these people, what are they feeling? And I just didn't take the time to put that into the outline. And it was easy because if I had done it, he actually created that scaffolding for me. You know, I had the action I could have put in the emotional beats, but I just started. And so what I found is that when I'm writing, I'm like, oh, so I've got to move him over there. And it all became about like moving the pieces around geographically instead of emotionally. And I can do that as a component to the piece. So if like Dave gives me beats in a story and I know that I have to write an action scene, I was famously, weak at that, many years ago, but I have no problem with action these days. I can write action fine, but it's a smaller piece of a larger picture. And I didn't understand.
That's okay. You could write the fuck out of a picnic scene.
Yeah. So I think that, what you have to do is if my way wasn't just gutting through it, which really did work for me, I didn't want to take the time to completely deconstruct that outline and start over, because that would have felt like I was starting over, and I would have felt like, oh fuck, I picked the wrong project. I shouldn't have wasted my early year on this. I knew I could just get through it and then make it awesome in the edit. But taking the time to get excited about what you're writing about, however you can do that. And it might not even be in the copy itself. Something that would have helped me if, my schedule at the time could have allowed for it, but it really couldn't with the time I was spending with Cindy and the children. But if I had watched a bunch of zombie movies, like if I went and, watched 28 Days Later and, a bunch of zombie movies that I liked, then that could have got me hyped up in the same way, because you're watching other people, articulate similar vibe, and you'll want to capture that. But I don't think you can just do what you're doing. Anytime that you're having a hard time writing, you're not getting inspired, you're finding it difficult on the page. If you expect that to just go away, it's going to take a lot longer to just go away.
Yeah, for sure. Final thoughts to wrap it up. Just, different circumstances are going to call for different approaches. If you have people just disrupting you every day, or a schedule change that just fucks with your routine, that's going to be a different thing than what Sean was describing with family and head shit, with catharsis, and what Dave was describing with running into trouble in the story. So there's no like one size fits all, but
it's staying on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the hardest thing that a lot of people face and that I hear from is, new parents and stuff. When you have a new child, it's a disruption and it's difficult, and you just got to find a way to like trade time with other people. Like, if you watch the kid, then I'll do this. Then you just got to find a way to carve the hours and really make the most of them.
All right. And of course, eat your problems away. Emotional eating is the key to success here, I think, is the message. That and heroin. That
was the key takeaway.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the title. Dead babies, emotional eating, and heroin. And the Masturbate Tragedy. It's just erase it. The Masturbate Tragedy.
That's the best title.
All right. That could be an episode of Worst Show Ever. Just saying. If we ever do one of those.
That should be our next show instead of Worst Show Ever, just Masturbate Tragedy.
I think if you search for a Masturbate Tragedy, I'm really curious to see if anything comes up. A little afraid.
Well, I know I'll be coming up.
It's just a link to Dave's diary.
Yeah. I'm going to get the domain name.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to the Story Studio podcast, as always. And we will see you on the next episode. Actually, is the next one the one where we're going to be doing watching Being John Malkovich?
Oh, God.
Correct?
Wait,
is that in the next episode?
Dave, have you seen it or not seen it?
I started watching it like when it came out on videotape. I started watching and I thought, this is the most pretentious shit I've ever seen. I couldn't make it 20 minutes in. So
well, then that means
I'll be curious if my opinions change.
Discussion.
Because I do like Upstream Color, and that's very pretentious.
Oh my God.
Upstream Color is 50 times as pretentious.
It's a billion times as pretentious.
All right. I'll give it a chance.
I think Being John Malkovich is wacky and fun. And
that's what I probably don't like.
But it's not pretentious. Upstream Color is pretentious.
I don't like fun.
No, all right. So, but that is next week, I think. Is that right? A week from today, whenever this runs.
Fun isn't fun.
So let's just pretend you'll be prepared. So if anybody wants to, first of all, obviously there's going to be spoilers. I'm glad I'm remembering to mention this. There's going to be spoilers, obviously. So if you want to listen in real time, real-ish time, like as soon as it's posted, without spoilers, you should watch it. Or if you just kind of want to be prepared and refresh, go ahead, watch Being John Malkovich.
Spoil a 25-year-old.
Well, this is also
it'll be spoiled for me. I haven't seen it.
Something else that's special about this episode is that anyone in the studio who wants to watch the movie and hop on with us and talk about it can.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. We may do kind of a like open door thing, like almost like office hours. Hey, who wants to pop in? So that'll be fun. All right. Well, so that's for next week, and we'll close this one up. And thanks. We'll see you next time.
peace out.
Goodbye.